An 18-year-old entered a car dealership with his own funds, prepared to purchase his first vehicle. They ejected him without hesitation. When his billionaire mother arrived the following day, she ensured that his name was never forgotten. Omari Thorne had meticulously organized his entire day. The air in Smyrna, Tennessee, was thick with a viscous weight just before a summer storm on Thursday. Omari did not object. He was wearing a gray windbreaker, black cargo trousers, and a pair of worn-out white Nikes. A blue plastic folder with 5 printed listings, all of which were used hybrids with reasonable mileage and were priced under $15,000, was concealed beneath his arm. He was not present to impress anyone, rather, he was preparing for his new existence. Omari had recently completed his high school education at a magnet school in Murfreesboro and had been accepted into the engineering program at Georgia Tech, an early decision. He desired a vehicle that was dependable for the lengthy commutes to and from campus. Nothing extravagant, simply an item that would not malfunction on Interstate 24. Consequently, his demeanor was composed and concentrated as he entered Crestview Motors, a diminutive yet immaculate dealership situated adjacent to the highway. He even took a moment to hold the door open for a woman who was exiting. She beamed at him. The attendant situated behind the front desk did not. She inquired, "Is it possible for me to assist you?" Without lifting her gaze from her screen. "Yes, I am present to examine a few of the hybrids you have listed," Omari replied, lifting the folder slightly. "I printed them out. I observed a Civic and a few Sonatas online." The woman briefly blinks before inquiring, "Are you present with your parents?" "I am purchasing it independently, madam." She extended a tense smile and gestured toward the parking lot. "An individual will be dispatched in the near future." However, no one arrived. Waiting by the sliding glass doors, Omari observed the exterior. He could observe the vehicles arranged in a neat and polished manner. The Civic was present. He verified the information once more, and it was the same as the listing. After taking a stride outside, he was halted when a tall man in a red Crestview polo shirt and slacks approached, preventing him from continuing. The man inquired, "Did you lose?" He held a clipboard in his hand, but he did not examine it. His attention was captivated by Omari's attire, specifically his sandals. Omari reiterated, "I am here to purchase a vehicle." He held the folder out once more. "No," the salesman did not even peer at it. "Well, this is not a location to be in if you are not serious. We have experienced recent incidents." Omari reiterated, perplexed. "Incidents? People are causing issues by coming around, checking out cars they can afford, taking photos, and causing a disturbance." Omari's stomach began to convulse, but he maintained a steady tone. "I have printed out a few models from your website. I am not taking photographs, I simply wish to test drive one." The man suppressed a chuckle. "Why don't you return with a parent or someone who is knowledgeable about financing?" "I do not require a parent. I am paying in cash, and my name is on the account," Omari stated. "I have already discussed the matter with my bank." "Look," the man said, taking a step back, "I'm not attempting to be impolite, all right? It's simply that people have ideas, and at this moment, I don't have the time for that." Omari refrained from moving. He gazed at the man, his folder still in his hands, now damp with perspiration. "So, do you wish for me to depart? I am informing you that we are currently occupied. You are welcome to return at a later date. Alternatively, you could consider visiting one of the nearby used lots, as they may have a more suitable option." It was located there. Omari refrained from disputing the matter and refrained from raising his voice. He glanced down at his folder, then returned to the Civic across the lot, and offered a faint nod of understanding, rather than agreement. He reversed direction, returned to his vehicle, and departed. However, the personnel at Crestview Motors were unaware of Omari Thorne's true identity. Omari did not listen to music on his journey home. Instead, he listened to the gentle squeak of his wipers and the silence as a precipitation began to streak across his windshield. He was not the type of child to rant or hurl objects. He conducted himself in a manner that was occasionally excessively silent for his own benefit. He took the lengthy route home, passing by the old park where he used to race his cycle with his cousin Elijah and the small library that still had posters from the reading challenge from last summer affixed to the window. Streets that are well known. Staticness that is well known. However, this time, he experienced a distinct sensation, as though the pavement beneath his treads was less durable than it had been in the past. Upon entering his driveway, he remained seated for a brief period, gazing out through the rain-speckled glass with his hands still on the steering wheel. The home emanated a scent of black coffee and lavender while inside. His mother had consistently maintained that those were the two owners that evoked a sense of ownership over the day. Omari continued to remain silent as he removed his shoes at the entrance. He proceeded to the kitchen, opened the refrigerator, and drank a glass of water. Dr. Ayanna Thorne was upstairs participating in a conference call. Omari could detect the cadence of her voice from her home office, cool, measured, and confident. She was the type of woman who could address the CDC board one day and then repair her son's injured knee the next. When she returned downstairs later that evening, she discovered him in the living room, seated on the settee with his laptop open and his folder next to him. She inquired, "Have you discovered any items that you particularly enjoyed?" He hesitated before stating, "I visited Crestview. They had some decent merchandise." Across from him, she took a seat. "You do not test drive anything, correct?" Ayanna's cranium was slightly tilted. He casually stated, "Why not? They instructed me to return with a parent, as they perceived that I was idly hovering, as if he were reciting a grocery list." Ayanna's lips were squeezed together. Nothing more than a momentary pause, not wrath. A precise delay. "Has an event occurred?" He shook his head. "It is irrelevant. I did not intend to initiate any activities there, I departed." She meticulously observed him. "Did they express a particular point?" "Not really. They just treated me as if I did not belong." After that, Ayanna did not express herself too much. She merely leaned forward, placed her hand on his knee for a brief moment, and then rose to begin putting away dishes from the sink. However, her thoughts were elsewhere. Omari returned to his laptop. He continued to peruse the listings. His bank account was still open in a separate browser. He was aware that he had had enough, yet he had never felt diminished. He was unaware that Ayanna was already formulating strategies in her office, which was located upstairs. She was not inclined to cause disturbances or charge into buildings. That was not her manner. She was of the opinion that movement should be conducted with precision and intention. In the event that you compelled her to speak, it was due to an essential necessity. And when she did, individuals paid attention. She made a single phone call that evening to an acquaintance who had previously provided consulting services to Crestview Motors and was employed in the property insurance industry. "I have a few questions regarding the owner, personnel structure, and customer interaction management. Nothing too substantial." She had acquired all the necessary items by the following morning. Omari was still unconscious when she reversed the Rolls-Royce out of the garage. She seldom operated it, it was more symbolic than functional. A gift from a French pharmaceutical investor with whom she had previously collaborated. Ayanna nearly sold it once, but her mother persuaded her to retain it. Her mother had stated, "Occasionally, individuals who believe they are already aware require an example of success." The silver accents of the vehicle captured the morning light like quiet armor as it transitioned onto the main road. However, the purpose of this was not to demonstrate one's abilities. It was a matter of being present. It was scarcely 9:30 a.m. when the double doors at Crestview Motors whooshed open. Once more, the atrium is identical. The same woman, who is situated behind the front desk, is typing away at her keyboard, her attention diverted by the light emanating from her screen. However, this time, it was not Omari. The car was the first object that captivated her, the kind that is difficult to forget. The midnight blue paint was so refined that it appeared to be a mirror. Rolls-Royce Dawn. Interior design that is personalized. Plates from Georgia. The type of vehicle that is uncommonly observed outside a mid-range dealership in Smyrna, Tennessee. The woman exiting was the second observation she made. Dr. Ayanna Thorne did not require to speak in order to captivate the audience. She entered the room in a navy suit, with heels that did not produce any noise, and only a silver watch as her ornamentation. There was no smile, nor was there any wrath, only the presence was present. The type that causes individuals to stand up slightly erect without understanding the reason. "Good morning," Ayanna greeted. The receptionist blinks. "Good morning. Are you here for a service appointment?" "No," she replied, placing her bag gingerly on the front counter. "I am interested in speaking with the manager." "Certainly. Just a moment." The receptionist rapidly dialed the phone, her gaze occasionally diverting to the vehicle parked outside. A man in his mid-40s, wearing a tucked-in dress shirt, and wearing Bluetooth in one ear, emerged in less than a minute. It appeared as though he was perpetually concluding a telephone conversation. He extended his hand and introduced himself as Dan Grisson, the general manager of this establishment. "What can I assist you with today?" Ayanna declined to accept the greeting. "Yesterday, you engaged with my son, who is 18 years old, black, and quiet. He was wearing a windbreaker and had printouts of several used vehicles with him. You instructed him to depart. Dan maintained his professional demeanor, despite the fact that his visage twitched. "I interact with a significant number of individuals, madam. It is feasible that there was an error in communication." Ayanna removed Amari's blue folder from her purse and placed it flat on the counter. "He arrived with this item. He demonstrated to your staff the specific models he was interested in. He had financing pre-approved and was prepared to pay cash. However, he did not take a test drive. Do you know the reason?" Dan's joy diminished. "There is no necessity to escalate this into a confrontation." Ayanna responded with a level tone, "It is not. It is informative." Dan inhaled. "Look, if he felt disrespected, I am more than willing to provide him with a second visit. Perhaps I could personally guide him through the inventory." "That will not be required." Dan appeared perplexed. "How can I rectify this situation?" Ayanna retrieved the folder, opened it, and displayed one of the listings. "You observed this Civic here? Your staff informed him that it was beyond his capabilities. You inferred that he did not belong and were unaware of his identity. However, this is not the issue." The paper was delicately flipped downward by her. "The issue is that he was a child with a dream and no bank account, and he still deserved respect." Eventually, Dan broke eye contact by subtly shifting. Ayanna again reached into her purse and extracted a single business card. It was matte black and featured her name in silver embossing, Ortec Biolabs CEO, Dr. Ayanna Thorne. "The next time a young man arrives with that level of preparation, I recommend that you inquire about his name before assuming his worth," she advised. "You are unaware of the individuals you are excluding." The room remained motionless for a brief period. The receptionist ceased to type. Another salesman paused at the entrance to the lot. Ayanna gazed directly at Dan. "I did not come here because my son requested it. In fact, he did not even want me to. He advised me not to make a fuss. However, that is the distinction between him and me. He extends grace, while I issue reminders." Dan forced himself to swallow forcefully. Ayanna turned toward the exit and adjusted her purse on her shoulder. "Oh, and the car outside," she said over her shoulder, "is not for sale, it is merely a visual aid." She exited without waiting for a response. However, the internal discourse was not concluded. "Not suitable for Dan. This is not intended for individuals who have observed her enter." Dan remained stationary for an entire 30 seconds following the door's closure. His ears were ablaze with realization, rather than embarrassment. He was not new to the position. He had sufficient experience in the industry to discern between individuals who arrived in search of a spectacle and those who arrived with the truth. The second one was brought by Dr. Thorne. The receptionist murmured behind him, "Was that her son yesterday?" "The child we were with." Dan declined to respond. He sat down in his office, glanced at his desk, and clicked his pen a few times. Subsequently, he summoned the merchant who had declined Omari's request, the same individual who wore the red Crestview polo. "Chris, please close the door." Chris appeared to be experiencing anxiety. "What is the matter? Do you recall the black teenager from yesterday who expressed interest in hybrids?" Chris acknowledged. "Yes. The individual who was observed in the vicinity of the Civic." Dan's palms were folded. He was not loitering. He had paperwork, printed listings, and was pre-approved. "His mother arrived this morning." Chris gently scoffed. "All right, but he appeared to be," Dan interrupted him. "He looked like what?" Chris paused, his mouth slightly open, but no words emerged. Dan reclined. "Have you ever considered the possibility that we may not attract a significant number of black customers because they enter, observe our behavior toward them, and promptly exit?" Chris trembled in his seat. "That is not the case." Dan inquired, "Are you certain?" "Because she did not yell or request anything for free. She simply desired to inform us of the individual we had rejected, not because he was impoverished, but because we had mistakenly assumed he was." Chris gazed at the floor. Dan directed his attention to the window that overlooked the parking lot. "We complain about online competition and the time that others waste every week. However, it is possible that we are squandering our own opportunities by determining who is worth our time before they have even spoken." Chris remained silent, likely reflecting on the numerous other young men he had dismissed with the same old excuses. In the meantime, Omari was still in bed at home, rewatching a video about solar battery conversions with his earbuds in. His morning was tranquil. He was unaware that his mother had already returned to the location from which she had previously excluded him. And he was not required to. She had not visited the location in order to obtain credit. She did it because she had previously observed it occur. As she drove home, Ayanna's own memories resurfaced, not from anger, but from a more distant source. She was mistaken for an intern by a supplier in a pharmacy facility in Columbus, Ohio, when she was 24 years old. Or when she was 30, she presented her initial synthetic blood proposal to a room full of males who only engaged with her white co-founder. Or when she was a panelist and someone inquired whether she was the marketing representative. It did not matter how many degrees she possessed. Certain individuals only observed what they were willing to. She did not intend to safeguard Omari from that. She was incapable of doing so. However, she could ensure that the next time they attempted to do so, someone would remember. Dan at Crestview Motors sent an internal memo that afternoon, while Ayanna was engaged in another Zoom meeting in her home office. Nothing extraordinary, merely a directive that served as a reminder to the team of the dealership's principles and the significance of treating all individuals with the same level of professionalism, regardless of their appearance. The fundamental issue was not resolved, but it was a start. He was aware of this. Additionally, he refrained from sending it due to concerns regarding a potential lawsuit or media post. Ayanna had not issued any threats. She was not obligated to. She had simply articulated the truth in a manner that was unarguable. However, the individual who had experienced it the most had not been present to hear it. Ayanna had not always been the type of woman who could enter a dealership and halt the speech of mature males. It was constructed, not created, with that level of composure and weight. Forged through pressure, occasionally agony, and always clarity. She recalled standing in line for reduced lunch as a child in Birmingham. Her mother labored at night to clean offices. By the age of 6, her father had passed away. Ayanna was the quiet girl who read science books in corners and borrowed anatomy guides from the public library while other children were slipping off to smoke behind the gym. People consistently underestimated her. They labeled her as aggressive when she articulated herself clearly and as too serious when she refrained from laughing at unfunny quips. Consequently, she maintained her concentration on a single objective, the construction of an object that could not be taken away. Omari had experienced a distinct lifestyle as a child, but Ayanna ensured that he did not develop entitlement. By the age of 11, she had instructed him in the construction of IKEA furniture and had him volunteer at free clinics during the weekend when the majority of children were sleeping in. Her motivation was not to subject him to hardship, but rather to expose him to the real world, rather than the secure environment she had established. Additionally, she instructed him on the appropriate times to exit and speak. This is why she was not taken aback when he arrived home the previous day, shrouded in silence and withdrawn. He had acquired the ability to suppress his wrath, not due to his vulnerability, but rather because he was raised to understand that silence can be more impactful than outbursts. However, her greatest concern was the rapidity with which he had embraced it. He was accustomed to it, not because he was indifferent. She was haunted by that notion throughout the day. Her son's 3.9 GPA, early acceptance to one of the nation's top technology institutions, and unflappable demeanor suggested that he had already reconciled himself to being perceived as a threat. Ayanna recalled a time when he was 10 years old and a neighbor from across the street called to report a strange youth walking through the yards. Omari was the child who was walking home from basketball practice with his gym bag and science fair project under his arm. She remembered Omari sitting calmly on the curb, just waiting, as the police car pulled up. Not apprehensive, not perplexed, merely fatigued. She never disclosed this information to him at that time. However, it was that evening that she initiated an investigation into security systems. Her objective was not to prevent individuals from entering, but rather to safeguard him from being misinterpreted. She was aware that the world would not always extend the same grace to her son as she had labored to achieve. That is why she instructed him to emulate the fluidity, strength, and composure of water. This is the reason he had refrained from engaging in a dispute at the dealership, and it is also the reason she did. Omari discreetly inquired, "Do you still have the list of dealerships you preferred?" Later that evening, as he returned downstairs with his backpack, Ayanna did not have much to say. She simply presented him with her phone, which contained a save note titled "Better Options." Even after purchasing the Rolls-Royce, she had not expunged it. He paused at one and continued to scroll. "Do you believe this individual would be receptive to my concerns?" Ayanna halted. "They ought to." The faint smile of Omari was interrupted by a subtle change in his pupils. He was not resentful, rather, he was more cognizant. However, neither of them was aware that an individual had been monitoring their narrative with a greater degree of attention than anticipated. The following morning at Crestview Motors was markedly different. Although there was no formal meeting or press release, there was a noticeable change in the atmosphere. The sales floor, which is typically bustling with forced smiles and conversation, was noticeably subdued. Not in silence, rather, contemplative. While grooming in the morning, Dan, the general manager, made a decision while gazing at his own reflection. Not only the child, but the entire culture, had been mishandled by him. He had permitted it to remain unattended for an excessive amount of time, a mentality that prioritized appearance over intent and made presumptions prior to the utterance of a single word. He arrived earlier than usual, just in time to observe Chris outside unlocking the Civic that Omari had intended to test drive. It was pointed out by Dan. "Please complete this task today. I require it to be fully operational, including the battery and tires." Chris extended his head in a half nod. "Do you believe the child will return?" "No," replied Dan. "I do not. However, the focus is no longer on him, it is on our next course of action." In the interim, Ayanna had already relocated. She refrained from remaining. She did not contact reporters or post about the incident, that was not her objective. She had not visited the location to garner likes or express outrage. She went to remind them, quietly and precisely, that their blind spots had repercussions. While enjoying coffee on the veranda that morning, she was reminded of the voice of her own mother: "Some individuals only perceive what they desire, until you demonstrate what they overlooked." Omari, on the other hand, was already communicating with a representative from a dealership located across the street, who responded to his inquiries online. One who, upon his request for a cash purchase option, did not flinch. He was not in a hurry. He was cognizant of his desires and his intolerances. Ayanna received a call from an unknown number later that day. She nearly declined to respond, but her curiosity prevailed. "Dr. Thorne, this is Dan Grissom from Crestview Motors." She refrained from uttering a word immediately. "I am aware that you did not request anything," he continued, "but I wanted to inform you that we have discussed the matter with our team. We are in the process of modifying our approach to walk-ins, particularly those who are under the age of 18. We will be implementing a training module on bias beginning next month. While it is not a comprehensive solution, it is a beginning." Ayanna did not express gratitude to him, not out of impoliteness, but rather out of a desire for precision. "Ensure that it remains in place," she advised. "I will." A hesitation ensues. "And inform your son that he has made a greater impact than he likely realizes." Ayanna stood in the center of her kitchen for a brief period after the call, holding her phone. She was not the type of individual who required validation. However, the conversation ultimately resolved the matter, not only because someone eventually acknowledged their error, but also because they expressed a desire to rectify it. Omari emerged from the garage that evening, clutching a key fob. "I believe I will opt for the Sonata," he stated. Ayanna raised her head from her laptop. "From the second position?" He agreed. "The individual in question guided me through the entire process. There was no unusual energy present, only the facts were communicated. It was a unique experience." She grinned. "Do you enjoy it?" "Yes. It is not particularly eye-catching, but it is reliable." "That's you," she replied. He paused before inquiring, "Did you address them?" She sat with her back against the wall. "I engaged in a conversation." He raised an eyebrow, but it was one that was serious. She stated, "I was not present to shout, rather, I was there to remind them of the person they had overlooked." Omari's smile was both authentic and slow as he processed this information. "I am grateful." Ayanna shook her head. "You expressed gratitude to me by refraining from allowing it to alter your self-perception." However, they both understood, without having to mention it, that silence is not a sign of frailty, rather, it is a strategic move. Occasionally, the most eloquent message is conveyed in the most subdued manner. The sedan was still in their driveway a week later, its paint still gleaming from the final dealer polish. Omari had already utilized it for a few short journeys, primarily within the city. Unpaved routes. A few turns in the parking lot to get a sense of the situation. Its calm and steady operation pleased him. Performance is the sole focus, attention is not given. Following that, he refrained from discussing the Crestview experience in detail, not because he had forgotten, but because it did not impact the outcome. He had already internalized the lesson, much like water in soil, it had been assimilated, not evaporated. Ayanna, too, observed it, albeit in minor increments. The manner in which he conducted himself when they ventured out. The manner in which he verified his bank application prior to making a purchase. The manner in which he inquired as to whether he should wear a colored shirt when they visited a different dealership later that month to assist his cousin in the search for a vehicle. He was not attempting to impersonate another individual, rather, he was simply adapting, as she had done on numerous occasions. There was no necessity for them to engage in a heart-to-heart conversation. That was not their preferred approach. Their conversations were situated in the inner room. In a fleeting glimpse across the kitchen. In the silent acknowledgement that occurred when a challenging statement was made, without being explicitly stated. While Omari assisted his cousin in practicing parallel parking one evening, Ayanna sat at her desk and reviewed several grant proposals. Her gaze was drawn to a photograph that was affixed to the corner of her monitor. The image depicted Omari at the age of 9, who was wearing a shirt that was 2 sizes too large and was holding a science fair ribbon. She was beaming. The family's ancient Honda Accord, which Ayanna had driven throughout her early career and during medical school, was visible in the photo behind him. Her smile was not elicited by the ribbon. It was the expression on his face. He had consistently possessed potential. And now, he carried evidence, not of affluence or revenge, but of his identity, regardless of what others believed. A few days later, she received an envelope in the mail that bore no return address. A note, which was handwritten on plain white stationery, was enclosed. "We are now performing better as a result of someone reminding us of the necessity of our actions. We are grateful. Crestview Motors." She folded it meticulously and inserted it into the back of her planner. Her intention was not to recollect them, but rather to remind herself that individuals can undergo transformations when they are forced to confront the things they have neglected for an extended period. She informed Omari of the letter that evening. He simply chuckled and remarked, "I suppose they have finally resolved the matter." Ayanna gazed at him. "You discovered it a considerable amount of time ago." He issued a modest shrug. "It still feels good, though," she chuckled. "Yes, it does." The sun was receding behind the residences across the street, resulting in the driveway being illuminated by long shadows. For a brief period, Omari stood by the car, his arms crossed, gazing at it. He then opened the door, slipped into the driver's seat, and began to operate the engine. There is no melody, only movement is present. The individuals who were significant were the only ones who were watching. In that instant, it was evident that he did not merely acquire a vehicle. He acquired something more substantial: self-respect, clarity, and the understanding that calm dignity is more persuasive than loudness. The way in which the world perceives you does not determine the way in which you perceive yourself. That occasionally, the most advantageous form of authority is to withdraw without losing one's voice. Stories such as Omari's occur on a daily basis, and not all of them involve a Rolls-Royce driving into the parking lot. However, each one carries a choice, for all of us to pause, to rethink, and to fully see individuals before determining who they are. If this narrative resonated with you, prompted you to contemplate, or served as a reminder of a person you know, please consider sharing it. Allow others to experience it as well. Additionally, please remember to subscribe. Additional narratives of this nature are forthcoming, stories that communicate discreetly but unmistakably.